Hey everyone, my name is Matt, and welcome back to the Coffee Bar. And I'm using this just as a placeholder name, but welcome to the second episode of the Coffee Bar podcast. I'm not 100% sold on the name. I am working on doing something a little bit better for it, but at least as of this moment, it's going to be the podcast name that we're going to run with for now. As you can see, I look a little bit different. My girlfriend straightened my hair. So I'm sure it's probably a little bit weird for y'all to see. It might come back later. I've been growing my hair out for a little while, but ultimately that's not what the topic is going to be for the day. I don't have a cup of coffee. Wow. A cup of coffee either. I do have tea though. And really, what today is going to be is kind of a large conversation about something that I decided to make a choice of based on kind of something that I realized I was losing some of the interest in as well as the enjoyment of. Sorry, I'm probably gonna say or quite a bit just because I'm trying to get all the thoughts out and explain everything. But once I begin streaming again, I know it has been quiet and I have talked about it a little bit between the first podcast episode as well as a small little thing that I might be working on the side. I've been very quiet on my live streams, which I'm hoping to get back into genuinely. At least at the time of recording, I believe the plan is streaming tomorrow. I think I know what game I'm going to do, but I'm also very indecisive, so I may end up changing my mind day of or anything like that, at least in terms of what it is that I'm playing. And the reason why I'm having that indecisiveness is I'm stepping away from Pokemon. There's a couple of factors that play a part into it. And one of them being, which will probably eat a lot of this podcast episode, is because of the Living Dex that I worked on. Something I did realize recently, I want to say it was around 3 weeks to a month ago, which was about the time that I had decided like I need to walk away from this, just because of a couple of the things that we're going to talk about here. I What was my train of thought? I'm so sorry. So I this podcast is going to be very ADHD rant kind of a thing. That was something I was diagnosed with. I believe it was about 2 to 3 years ago, and around that same time, I was actually diagnosed with autism. So I, while I've been able to manage how to maneuver with those in mind, with being neurodivergent, sometimes I do still have a little bit of difficulty with that navigating. But ultimately, there's a couple topics that I did want to touch on, and the Living Dex is one of them. I believe the thought that I was trying to get to is around the time that I made the decision to kind of push Pokemon back and play it less. I found out that there's a couple Pokemon that I'm missing that I am willing to go after because it's just some alternate forms. My Living Dex is very much not a proper Living Dex when you compare it to potentially other people. And I think that's going to be something that I talk about throughout the course of this episode. When the best part to start is, when did I decide to do a Living Dex? And I want to say time frame. The groundwork for it, and it was an unknowing groundwork that I had laid, was back in about 2016. So around the time, I had started a save file on Fire Red when I had first got it, and it was very, do a little bit and then not play it for a while, jump back in, do a little bit more, fall off of it, because I was either playing different video games with friends, or I was maybe playing a different Pokemon game, or just whatever was going on in life. So part of why 2016 sticks out a little bit is I remember telling the story to one of my good friends about throwing no damage to a Moltres, throw an Ultra Ball, nothing happens, throw the second one, catches, and just hooting and hollering, really. So something that I was doing without essentially knowing what it was that I was doing was, well, what if I get Bulbasaur to Mew, but have each individual Pokemon? So I was completing a Kanto Living Dex, partially in pursuit of completing the Fire Red Dex. And I'm like, okay, cool. Like, that's kind of a cool thing. Around the time I was doing a playthrough in Emerald, the first save was unfortunately corrupted. And the sort of question of the day that I want to present, and I want to see if there's other people that have seen this issue before. This happened years ago. The save file is very, very far gone, so I wouldn't be able to retrieve it. But I had gotten a copy of Pokemon Ruby from a good buddy of mine, because he's like, I'm not really playing Pokemon. I got a Game Boy SP. I've got Ruby. You can have it. I think I threw him a little bit of money. I don't remember exactly how much. It was quite some time ago. Got the Ruby, and seeing that there were Pokemon on it that my friend had used when he was a kid, I thought, hey, it would be kind of cool to trade them over and essentially try and preserve them and be like, hey, I still have your Pokemon from when you played. Well, completed the trade, and when I was leaving the trade room, my player character sprite was just gone. So I don't know what sort of like glitch or whatever had happened, but if that's something that you've seen before, definitely let me know down in the comments below. I'm very curious to see if this is a situation that other people have seen before. First time it had ever happened to me, I was super bummed, and I when I told my buddy, I was like, dude, I tried to, save your Pokemon, but unfortunately, like, my game corrupted. And he seemed a little bit bummed about it, but he just kind of shrugged his shoulders and was like, it is what it is. So after that had happened, started a new save file, and also unknowingly was doing trying to do a Hoenn Living Dex. And I think that save file I had started around 2016, 2017. I kind of dropped it for a while. So fast forward a little bit to about late 2018, early 2019 is the reason I wanted to start doing a Living Dex, and now understanding what a Living Dex was partially from the video that John Stone had done. And if I recall correctly, the premise of it was, with as few games and as few consoles as possible, how quickly can you create a Living Dex? So I was like, oh, it's completely doable. I have most of the peripherals that were in that video. I could do something like that. And then video by Lorekeeper Toby, or formerly known as Birdkeeper Toby, was completing what I believe is called a Master Dex. And the premise of that is you complete a Living Dex, but there are certain Pokemon when you're completing the Dex that you have to get from certain games. So a couple of ones that stick out, and they're just the ones that I'm thinking of immediately, because I can't think of any others offhand, is like the Ho-Oh from Mount Battle in Pokemon Colosseum, or the Lugia from XD Go of Darkness. So as I'm watching that, I'm like, that's actually really cool. That seems more kind of interesting to me. And at that point, I started really thinking about, like, well, what if I do a Living Dex? And not having things like Pokemon Colosseum or the Colosseum bonus disc or XD or some of the other side games, it wasn't going to be an exact replica of the Master Dex, but I kind of was looking at doing a sort of modified version of the Master Dex, just based on the peripherals that I had access to, which really was just the main series. 2019, I know it was between about January and April. So I believe it was somewhere in that window. Is at the time I was beginning to make progress on the Living Dex, and I played through Pokemon Diamond, the first full playthrough that I had done in over 10 years, I think it was. And then the first ever full playthrough of Pearl, because that was the game that my sister had while I had Diamond. So I played through all of those, and I believe it was within that window was the announcement of Sword and Shield. And I got relatively excited. New games, the new box Legends, I thought looked pretty good at the time. And the decision that would end up creating a lot of problems for me in the future, unknowingly at the time because of my pride and hubris, was what if I did 2 Living Dexes? And if I tried to explain without putting up a graphic on screen, I may work on trying to put something together just really quick. But all of the main series games that I would have done for the one Living Dex would get split between the two Living Dexes. For those who are familiar with the games and version exclusives and things like that, I'm sure you can immediately see that's going to present a problem down the road. But my arrogance, whatever you want to call it, said I can do it, and I'm going to make it work somehow, some way. So off I went to start this. I did some cleaning up with trying to finish up, filling in some of the gaps that were in the Fire Red save. I had finished the Emerald playthrough, I believe it was somewhere around May of 2019. Timeframes are going to be a little bit rough. I do have photos on my phone that can give a bit better timestamps. So I'm going to kind of be winging some of this. Some of them I could recall relatively clearly, but we'll do our best to kind of keep everything sort of timeline, true to the timeline essentially. Because all this was done off stream. I think there was previously I had done a single live stream when I was doing stuff kind of alongside the Living Dex, but I don't think it was really part of it. But we'll get there. We'll get there later. So split up the games, and I'm like, okay, well I have this Living Dex that covers for this one that covers for this. I can still do trades between the two just to help with getting some of the version exclusive stuff, and we'll just kind of figure it out from there. First mistake, I was not organized. Jumping ahead just briefly, I didn't start an Excel spreadsheet until halfway through Gen 4, which was bad. So that was mistake number 1. Continuing through, as I'm playing through Ruby, I'm playing through Sapphire, playing through Leaf Green. During the time I was working on the Gen 3 games, is a small complication was added to the Living Dex, which I think really helped to show how the unorganizedness of this project really was starting to bite. But I was willing to just, let's wing it, let's send it, let's just get it done. And I thought I had a good plan. Ultimately, I don't know that it really was, and that we can cover that a little bit later. But I ended up being able to get my hands on in early to mid 2020. It was around the time, I believe, COVID was active, the shutdown had happened, and I think it was when things were opening up a little bit, but before it was kind of like a re-lockdown. I had gone to a local game store and managed to pick up XD Gale of Darkness and the Coliseum bonus disc, which was incredible to find. Not something that I would have expected to have gotten, and at the time, they were really good deals. They hadn't completely shot up in price as they are at the time of recording this video or this podcast. But I remember picking those up, and I played through XD. It was the first full playthrough that I had done. I played a little bit of that in Coliseum as a kid. Didn't really get that far into it, just because it was like the double battle. It wasn't similar enough to the main series. That part of that was just not something that I really enjoyed, and ultimately comes from a skill issue. But once I finally completed XD Gale of Darkness, I was approaching finishing the Gen 3 games. So I was getting ready to jump into Gen 4, be able to start transferring everything. And because I had 2 Living Dexes I was trying to do, well, what am I going to do with all the Pokemon in the game? And my solution is based on the pipeline of essentially the plant pipeline. I would take the, just kind of split up stuff a little bit. I think most of it ended up actually going to what would be the Living Dex that stayed. But for like the Johto Pokemon the Living Dex that was going into Soul Silver, get whatever were like not version exclusives to Soul Silver, put those up into this Living Dex, and the stuff that was not available in Heart Gold, trade that into that Living Dex, so that way it was just a little bit less that I had to do once I actually got to the Gen 4 games. Unfortunately, it was a relatively complex thing. If in the event that I didn't put the graphic up, what I'll do is I'll call the Living Dexes the red Living Dex, which is the one that eventually will get scrapped. Spoiler alert. And then the blue Living Dex, which is the one that stayed. So the red Living Dex, the pipeline was Emerald and Fire Red would transfer into Soul Silver. Feeding into Soul Silver would be Diamond and Pearl. That would all lead into White, then White 2. Then it would transfer to, I believe it was X and Omega Ruby. So part of why it's considered like the red Living Dex. Then it would go into Sun, Ultramoon, and then that would be, I believe that was going to end up going into Shield. So then the other Living Dex would have been Ruby, Sapphire, Leaf Green, would all go into Heart Gold and then have Platinum supplement, would go into Black, Black 2, and then was going to go Y, Alpha Sapphire, go into Moon, Ultra Sun, and then Sword. So I think in a way, when I kind of color coded is because of the end result. The blue living dex would go into sword, which is the more blue one, and then shield, which is more the red one. Again, just for explanation, if I don't have the graphic up, or if this ends up going to being something that is like an audio only option, figure at least explain that. So jump into, once I finally completed the Gen 3 stuff, after splitting up the Pokemon from XE Gale of Darkness, just to assist in a little bit of the grinding for Heart Gold, Soul Silver, jump into Gen 4, play through Heart Gold, play through Soul Silver, play through Platinum, and this Platinum playthrough was the first one that I had done not in a single sitting, but every sitting that I played, it was in so much closer proximity to my playthrough before. So I was able to keep better track of where I was in the game and just, I guess, organized a little bit better in a way. But being the way that I had done the Living Dexes, that wasn't entirely true. Before, I believe it was actually Platinum happened before Heart Gold Soul Silver, because it was going into Heart Gold Soul Silver. That's when I actually created the spreadsheet that would help me keep track of what Pokemon do I have, where are they, if I don't have them, where can I find them. And I actually have on my Surface Pro, I was actually able to track down a copy of the Living Dex Excel spreadsheet. And it was from a point before I had actually done the playthrough. And so it was kind of interesting. It was either before I had done the playthrough or part of the way through it. I only briefly looked at it, but it was kind of a cool little relic to look at. So Gen 4, I managed to fill everything out. And by the end of it, I was at 493 of 493 in both Soul Silver and Heart Gold. And I kind of felt like it would be cool to have to converge everything into and eventually transfer out, having them in the Johto games. That was one of the decisions I think I did at least somewhat correctly. Made for transferring from the Gen 3 games a lot easier. And I was able to basically just say, okay, I have the completed decks. I have everything all right here. Once it comes time to doing the Gen 5 games, send it. So now that we're jumping into the Gen 5 part, sorry that there's going to be a little bit of a cut. Needed to step away for something a little bit urgent. So I'd like to try and have everything just single cut, but with it being just myself doing the podcast, it might be a little bit difficult. But now that we're in Gen 5, which is going to be the beginning of what I would call contentious time when I was working on the Living Dex, what I figure I should do is actually explain the rules for my Living Dex, because I think that's something relatively important, and I think it counts a little bit for kind of the challenges and a little bit of why the Living Dex took as long as it did, and even though it's not technically complete, why it took so long for me to get to this point. So the first rule is each Pokemon that was included in the Living Dex needed to be from its region of origin. So Bulbasaur needed to be from Kanto, Chikorita needed to be from Johto, Torchic from Hoenn, and Piplup from Sinnoh, for example. The only exceptions to that rule are Pokemon that I got in the Ore games. So they would kind of fall under a separate category. In a way, the two unknown forms that were introduced in Fire Red, Leaf Green, I didn't count those for being Kanto because Unknown is a Johto Pokemon, so everything had to have been caught in Heart Gold, Soul Silver. it also kind of fed in with the playing as many games as possible. So that's why I started in Gen 3 and then went up to, all the way up to now Gen 9. I did have access to the virtual console games, but I wanted to be able to also like run through like the different regions and stuff. So that kind of plays into a sort of sub-quest, which I'll jump into in just a moment after I get through the rest of the rules. Second rule is all Pokemon needed to be caught in Pokeballs. For the instance of Pokemon that are only event exclusive, or the Therian forms of the genies in Dream Radar, those are the only exceptions. Then the third rule is I needed to use Pokemon that I have either never used or rarely used in playthroughs. Starters kind of fit into this rule because I do typically build my team around the starter, but that was also something to kind of take into consideration. Now, with those rules in mind, that was really the big chunk of the goal that came out of the Living Dex, outside of just having access to all the Pokemon. I do also remember when I made the decision to do the 2 Living Dexes and continued to double down with it even after the announcement of Dexit, is I looked at it as, well, if I have the 2 Living Dexes, I get to use whatever Pokemon in whatever game moving forward, regardless if it's full National Dex or not. Am I still upset about Dexit? Yes. Is that for another video? Also yes. But I'm not here to add more fuel to that fire. I think there are a lot of people that are still relatively upset with that decision, and we can talk about that at another time. So the subquest is, I really wanted to also go for completionism with the Living Dex, which is something that I failed to do. And I think I'll leave the pin in that, so I can kind of talk about that again a little bit later, because that's kind of where the Emerald project that I had talked about in the last episode, that kind of plays kind of feeds in a little bit more to kind of rectifying that issue. But we'll skip over that, or at least skip over speaking about that extensively at this time. But long story short, what I wanted to do is, as I was playing through the games, do all like the different battle facilities, do side quests, get all the ribbons, get all this other cool stuff that you can do within the games. Did some of that, so certain Pokemon will have all the different league ribbons, they'll have day of the week ribbons, they'll have like the Mount Battle ribbon, stuff like that. But we'll gloss over that just momentarily. Gen 5, I played through Pokemon Black. I want to say, and I'm actually just pulling up my Excel spreadsheet just to see if I have the exact date that I started it. Okay, so it was May of 2022 that I officially started the Gen 5 games. And played through Pokemon Black. Did that, and what I was going to do is then go through Pokemon White and then do the White 2 Black 2 playthroughs and just kind of just get whatever grinding, because I wanted everything to kind of converge into the sequel games, since I would have access to certain mythicals that weren't available in the Black and White games. Finish Pokemon Black, go to play through Pokemon White, and because I had predetermined what the team that I would run is, I got to about the desert resort, and I was beginning to feel burnout. I had been playing Pokemon for so long, I was getting frustrated. I was essentially just playing a copy of the same game. But I was like, I want to actually complete this project. This is a project I've already sunk so much time into. I gotta do it. And I reached the desert resort, and I was doing some grinding. I think, just doing some catching, just try to get myself set up for the next locations. And just reached a point where I was having so little fun playing the game. I said, I need to stop. I'm going to jump into White 2, and then I'll just come back to White later. So I ended up playing through White 2, which was the first time I had done a full playthrough of the sequel games in Unova. Played it, I was like, this game was actually really good. Now, having replayed through Gen 5 older, and having the context of some of the generations that happened later, it really changed my perspective on the generation as a whole, because I wasn't a fan of it as much when it had first come out. So, play through White 2, sweet. Now I can actually transfer that Living Dex that I have done in Soul Silver, drop it in, do some grinding, and just kind of keep going. And I want to say that was, if I looked at my spreadsheet correctly, what happens, the stuff that I'm covering right now, at least the grinding in White 2, the transferring over, finishing that main story, and the decision to drop the second Living Dex was all about September of 2022. I remember playing through, I'm running through the Elite Four. I had gotten a bunch of the Unova Pokemon. It was just a matter of evolving, getting experience, stuff like that. And I'm using Pokemon from that Living Dex, and I'm just going through, and I'm looking at the Pokemon on the screen from the playthroughs that I had done, and there was no attachment. I didn't look at them and go, oh yeah, that was my dude, you know, he did this super cool thing in the playthrough, there, you know, whatever. And I just felt like, why am I putting this effort in here? And it was at that time that I said, why am I doing 2 Living Dexes? Why did I willingly choose to do this? And at that point, I scrapped the Living Dex. Everything that was in the red Living Dex, whatever was there in White 2, I transferred into Omega Ruby, and I think eventually transferred those up into Home. And all of those Pokemon that I'm aware of, outside of maybe 20, everything else was released. I just experienced the burnout so hard that I completely rechanged the plan that I was originally going for. So I go and do my Black 2 playthrough, and I felt a little bit of rejuvenation. There was a lot of stress that I just willingly took off my shoulders, set off to the side, and said, I can focus here. And I think that focus was something that I needed to get that little bit of a boost. But unfortunately, it was a bit short-lived. About November of 2022, was when I had completed everything for Gen 5. I got the full Living Dex, and I was able to jump into Gen 6. Excuse me. Correction, now that I'm looking at the spreadsheet. Because of the season system that's in the Gen 5 games, I had to go back later and finish it in December of 22 to get all of the forms and stuff. So at that point, I would have been working on the games in Gen 6, which it looks like, and unless I misread... Okay, so it looks like while I was still working on some of the forms and stuff, is I did start doing some work in Gen 6 in October. I finished Pokemon X in December, and then just under a week later, I rolled credits for Alpha Sapphire. I don't have any record of when I did my Y playthrough, but I was able to complete everything that I needed to do in Gen 6. It looks like New Year's Day of 2023. And that was minus the mythicals, just due to those events not being available. And while I did do the Nintendo DNS settings for Gen 4, I didn't know how to do that for Gen 6. The other rule that I didn't explicitly say is I couldn't use exploits. So I couldn't, Action Replay or Game Shark, any of the Pokemon. I had to hard search and catch these Pokemon. So kind of a big rule. And some would say that the DNS is an exploit. That's not really, but that's the only way to get access to those Pokemon, especially in the games of origin. And I don't think it's really an exploit, since you're able to still access it on the cart. Everybody can debate it if it's something that you so desire, but I made the decision. It's okay. It's my Living Dex, so be it. Gen 6, though, part of what helped with the completing it so fast is Kalos didn't introduce a lot of Pokemon. But I was also reaching that point of just super frustration and super burnout during that generation. I very much stand in the camp of Kalos and Kanto are the least good Pokemon games. I genuinely don't enjoy going through those regions, and if those are your favorite regions for any reason, this isn't me saying you have bad taste, but just my personal opinion, I am not a fan of Kalos, nor am I a fan of Kanto. And playing through X and Y really made me change the... initially, I was somewhat of a fan of it. I didn't feel resentment. I felt like there were interesting areas to explore. This time around, potentially caught burnout being something to take part in the change of perspective. I just wasn't vibing with it. It just wasn't the region for me. And I do still share that sentiment, but ultimately that's just my perspective. I'm not telling you to change yours if yours differs. But again, didn't get to do the Battle Maison, the Battle Chateau, or any of that cool stuff. And I believe it was around this time that I had decided to change the amount of Pokemon that I was trying to do the league ribbons with. Because what I was intending to do was be able to run all my different playthrough teams through the Elite Fours of various games, get the champion ribbons, get like the red ribbon, and just kind of pseudo ribbon master, because I wasn't doing the battle facilities, but be able to do all that cool stuff. And I trimmed it down to only about 5 teams that I would specifically go for those ribbons with. And there was a small handful of other Pokemon that were included. They were kind of additional members to the playthrough team. So like a Pokemon that I could just swap in and out of the team and would be able to still run through Elite Four with, and just kind of honorary members, I think is a good way to put it. And then other cool Pokemon that I got, like the shiny Gibble that I got for completing the White Forest Black City, whatever the facility is in Black 2 that you do to get the shiny Gibble. Well, I got that, so I was trying to get a bunch of ribbons with that. In Heart Gold, I hatched out of the egg from Professor Elm. I got a shiny Togepi, so another one that I was trying to get all these ribbons on. And just a small collection that I would be able to kind of flex with, that I got to do some kind of cool stuff with. Go through Alpha Sapphire, which I had done part of a playthrough of, but I ended up just getting a couple bogus Pokemon, put them on the team in Alpha Sapphire, ran through the story, got to the point where I could catch Deoxys, so completing the Delta episode, had everything transferred in, got the Deoxys, finished out whatever else I needed, got the couple ribbons, and then I was out. So I was done with Gen 6 really, really quickly. And the completionist thing, I really lost out on even more so because I didn't get to do anything with the Battle Maison or Battle Chateau, which was part of the goal with the Living Dex in the first place. Get to Gen 7, and I believe I had modified it so it was just going to be playthroughs of Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon, with them having the new Ultra Beasts that were exclusive to each version. And I believe there were a couple of mythicals that were added that were only exclusively available in the Ultra games. Thankfully, for being active in the franchise around Gen 7 and having at least 3 of the 4, if not all 4 of the Alola games, I was able to get extras of certain event Pokemon. So I had extras for the Marshadow. I think I had an extra of the Zeraora. I had just a couple other stragglers that were event exclusive that I could go, okay, cool, I have this guy. This can count for the Living Dex, and I kept him behind. And thankfully, with also doing the, kind of holding stuff behind, is I had an extra shiny Poipole from the event, so I was able to actually do a little bit of grinding and have a shiny Naganadel as an honorary member for, I believe it was my Ultra Sun team. Yes, it was the Ultra Sun team, because I'll jump back to, I ended up going back to the Ultra Moon playthrough later. So I did my Ultra Sun playthrough, and did the playthrough, did a bunch of the grinding, getting the Pokemon, transferred everything in, and at this point I can now see the light at the end of the tunnel. This Living Dex is almost done. And, seeing that we're really, really, really close to the end of it, something that I didn't explain as we were going through is during this time, some of the generations took a little bit longer to complete, partially due to new games that have come out. So, like, Sword and Shield would have been released by this point. Now in 2023, about 2023, 2024 time was when I was working on the Gen 7 stuff. Is, both DLCs for Sword and Shield had come out. Legends Arceus had been out. Scarlet Violet are out. So I was jumping away from the Living Dex specifically, but also doing stuff to assist the Living Dex in those later generations. So I'm getting a lot closer to the end goal than was maybe accounted for up to this point, just because not having that additional context. With the light at the end of the tunnel, I can see it. I'm just trying to push and get this done. And after I got Ultra Sun done, I believe I started the Ultra Moon playthrough. I got a little bit in and I said, I need these in Pokemon Home now. And I left gaps in the Living Dex for the playthrough team I was going to use in Ultra Moon, the Ultra Moon exclusive Ultra Beast Legends, and just the small gap of stuff that game would take care of once I got to it. Everything else went to Home. I was frustrated, I was burned out, and really just over the entire process by this point. And once I got everything into Home, there was a bit of a sigh of relief, because I could finally see, not quite yet in its completion, but I could finally see what all this labor was for, even though some of it was put into something that now doesn't exist. So finally, I'm getting to put the Pokemon into Sword and Shield, and I'm kind of running through. I'm getting ribbons. I'm doing, I might have been doing some raids and just whatever kind of stuff in the game with whoever I could actually transfer in, and that felt good. I was beginning to enjoy playing the games, but I still wasn't completely content. I think there was a part of it that I think the Home hadn't quite connected with Scarlet Violet. This time frame I can't recall 100%, but and I don't have any sort of time frame with it on this document. But I'm finally able to transfer my Pokemon into Scarlet and Violet, and that gave a lot of access to Pokemon that I use in the playthroughs, whereas Sword and Shield seemed very limited. There were, most of my teams, I could only typically do 3 of the original 6, with I think one or two teams being closer to full, but still missing at least somebody in it. But again, I finally get to put these Pokemon in. I get to kind of run around in the new games. I get to fight the Elite Fours. I get to run around in the wildlife and do all this kind of cool stuff. Eventually jump back into Ultra Moon. I do the playthrough, and I could not get out of there fast enough. The team was not very good. It was hard carried by Mimikyu. I got everything I needed and split. Like, I was done. And kind of didn't do anything Living Dex related for a while, and part of it was because so much of it was done and I couldn't do anything until eventually Legends EA dropped, because that had been announced and I was still missing all the mythicals from the Kalos games. So I had all that I had to wait for, and I did like the alchemy version, you know, all the alchemy variants. There were some Pokemon I had to go back, and throughout the process had to go back to the older games to make sure that I had, you know, a Kanto Pokemon was from Kanto, a Hoenn Pokemon was from Hoenn. That didn't apply to the Pokemon that were acquired in Ore. And then doing some kind of cleanup in the Johto games. But I finally had reached a point where I was only 3 Pokemon away from being done. Or at least 3 unique Pokemon being done. Because something that actually is part of why this Living Dex is nowhere near perfect is I would need to go back through and play through certain games in the franchise that requires me to kind of add in stuff that I didn't really account for in the Living Dex. And why does that matter to me? Well, part of it is fixing the organization that I didn't have before. And if I'm doing a playthrough of a game, I don't really want to do a playthrough for one Pokemon. If I'm doing it, I want to be able to have multiple accounted for and still be part of the Living Dex. But with everything already being accounted for, it doesn't make sense to spend all these hours going back to like Pokemon White to get the Thundurus or the Tornado, whichever one's the version exclusive. Doing another playthrough of Legends Arceus just for another Enamorus. Like, I'm not interested in doing that. And so there are gaps in my Living Dex, but that's okay. Like, it's my Living Dex. I got it to this point, and in some ways, I'm kind of stubborn about not going back through and playing the other games right now, partially because it's a lesson for myself. I should have planned better. I shouldn't have done the second Living Dex. But without being just negative about the process, what are some of the positives that came out of it? Minus 3 Furfrou forms and a couple alternate forms for Pokemon, I have a complete Living Dex. I've been able to find Pokemon that I maybe didn't really like before, but now I hold very dearly. I've found certain Pokemon are really, really good, and I've also learned that some are not as good as I thought. I got to use Pokemon that I've really wanted to use for a long time, but just never had a chance to. Things like Tyranitar or Scizor. Drapion is another one. You know, getting to use these Pokemon that I didn't really get to use before. And, like, Rotom is kind of an absolute unit. But I never would have done that if I hadn't done the Living Dex. I also got to experience and roll credits for a number of Pokemon games that I had never done so before. So there were a lot of positives that came from completing this Living Dex, and that felt really, really good. But it also came at the cost of so much burnout and loss of enjoyment for these games. And I think that really affected, you know, it really affected me for a little bit. The last episode we talked about the Emerald Project, and I don't recall exactly if I said this, so I'm not gonna spend too much time with it, because the other portion of the episode that I want to talk about is the reason that I'm stepping away from Pokemon. But the Emerald Project kind of feeding into this is, I think, something that is relevant to the conversation. And what the Emerald Project is in a way supposed to do what I was trying to do with the Living Dex, and that's completionism. This is kind of becoming my forever save file. I have a Japanese copy of Emerald that once I complete everything in the English copy, I'm going to transfer it into the Japanese copy and just leave it. I'm going to still, transfer everything out, but because I'll have that backup, I'll be able to drop that into the Japanese copy and be able to just say, like, these are the Pokemon I collected, and these are the ones that I got to do the cool things with. Getting the silver symbols in the Battle Frontier, the gold symbols in the Battle Frontier. Did the Mount Battle fights and all that kind of cool stuff. And it actually fixes acquiring the ribbons on the Pokemon that mattered, because keeping track of the ones that I use for the Living Dex, there are a lot of empty holes. And part of it was because of the being not organized. So going back and kind of fixing with these shinies what I wanted to do for the original Living Dex was really a big goal. So now, I have this new Pokemon project that I'm trying to do. I'm already, 220, 30, 200 something odd hours in this project that I still have so much to do. I still have to play like Pokemon XD. I still have to get the rest of the symbols. I have to do this. I have to do this. Well, if I have this project and I was able to stick it out with the Living Dex and really push through, why am I walking away and not playing Pokemon now? And really it's not just Emerald that kind of fed into this problem. I had this Living Dex that has taken 7 years, and I had to go through trying to do 2 of them and breaking one off and focusing on this one and not really fitting the goal that I originally intended. But then I also have Pokemon Legends ZA, Pokemon Legends Arceus, Scarlet and Violet, that all ended up unknowingly causing a problem in this as well. And what that issue is how much time I've spent playing the games. Well, if you're having fun, then what's the problem with that? It really locked in about a month before the recording of this episode of the podcast that I was laying on my bed, and because I have my TV mounted here on my wall, and just kind of laying in bed and just resetting in this one hyperspace area, trying to get a single shiny Pancham, because I had already caught one in, maybe it was another hyperspace portal, it might have been in the wild at Zone, but I'm sitting here resetting for a single shiny Pokemon. And by that point, I had caught 8 or 9 shinies. And it wasn't of the Pokemon that I was hunting for. And as I'm sitting there for hours doing resets, because I got, the super strong donut, and being able to just do the resets, it doesn't take as much time off the clock. And I sat there and I went, why am I doing this? Why am I spending hours trying to shiny hunt for one Pokemon? And this Pokemon is likely not going to be something that this is a shiny that I'm not going to do anything with. Or potentially do anything cool with. For at least another year. Because Winds and Waves, while it's been announced, we don't have a release date at time of recording. And I can't transfer this shiny Pancham into a different game because it's the coding of Legend ZA won't let me, even if I do transfer it to home. And that was kind of a nail in the sort of coffin, if you will. And the last part that really fed into why I needed to walk away. As I briefly touched earlier, I was recently diagnosed with ADHD. Around that time, I was also diagnosed with autism. And full transparency, I have been diagnosed with those things. I am not bringing this up as any sort of an attack on anybody. There are people very, very close to me who are also either diagnosed one, diagnosed the other, or have symptoms or signs of one or the other. And you know, we're able to talk about it and help each other with ways to maneuver around it. What works for you? What helps you kind of stay focused? What helps you do this? What helps you do that? So, you know, there is nothing wrong with you if you have one or the other or both. I am just speaking on something that is something that happens with having one or the other, and just explaining kind of how it's been for me. And the thing that I'm going to focus on specifically is the hyperfixation. And as I was looking through a collection of old sketchbooks, I was actually looking for a drawing that I had done years ago. And I was like, I remember I drew it. I don't know if I still have it. And I was just trying to find it and see. And looking through old sketchbooks, which are funny enough, right in that box right there, is I've got a bunch of sketchbooks that are like drawn in, ones that aren't, or like partially drawn in. And as I'm looking through, I'm finding just drawings of Pokemon, like characters that were like NPC, or like the player characters, but in a sort of fan fiction. Now, before you all start hitting me in the comments and flaming me for it, this was a fan fiction that I wanted to write when I was younger, and the idea was extremely safe for work. I think there was maybe one romance, and it wasn't really that much romance. Romance really just wasn't a thing. It more focused on how would the player characters from like Gold, Silver, Crystal interact with the player characters from Ruby, Sapphire, Emerald. And that was really the premise of the story. And so I had like, you know, the fan fiction characters drawn and like Pokemon that they use. Also looking for that, you know, other things that I think it was related to trying to find that piece of art. Or I was trying to look for something else that I have in some storage bins in my closet. I found pages flipping through, and it was like, hey, this character and what Pokemon are on their team. What Pokemon do they also own? What levels are they? What moves do they know? And it was kind of eye-opening to see how much this hyperfixation was actually such a hyperfixation. It was scary. It was unhealthy amounts of this hyperfixation, that I'm looking at all of these things related to Pokemon that ultimately I have done absolutely nothing with, and just I just said just wow was my reaction. And because I had seen how far it had gone in really an unhealthy direction, that was kind of the breaking point that I said, I need to walk away. I need to just take time away from Pokemon, because I've put so many hours into the different games, thinking about things maybe with like the video game championship formats, so jumping into potential competitive stuff. I was playing it on stream, I was playing it off stream, I was, you know, playing or talking about or collecting Pokemon cards, which that's a whole nother beast that we can talk about another time. You know, like talking about, there was so much of my life that was just Pokemon, that even friends of mine were like, that's the Pokemon guy. And they would typically, if they had a question about anything Pokemon related, they'd typically come to me and be like, hey, Pokemon thing. And just hours and hours and hours, and, you know, tens, hundreds, thousands of hours that were just devoted to this franchise and the IP. And while I love the characters, I mean, you can see some of the plushes and stuff that I have over here, and there are also a handful more that aren't shown here on the camera. And, you know, because, sorry, it's mirrored, but I've got 3-4 more that you can't, 5 more that you can't even see up on this top shelf, and just various Pokemon merchandise and stuff that I have here in my room, and I believe in my living room as well. So it's like I have a bond to these characters and these creatures, but that bond was becoming an obsession. But I feel like obsession doesn't quite cover it. It was just so all-encompassing in my life. And seeing all of that and kind of having that perspective change, I needed to just let's put our energy into something else. Pokemon has provided the ability for me to meet new people. I've been able to make friends from playing the Pokemon TCG. I've made friends with other streamers because of Pokemon. We've been able to laugh about stuff. We've been able to talk about different things. You know, there have been hours that I've spent talking with friends that I had already established, but just talking about certain things Pokemon related, and just kind of understanding each other with like different favorites and all of that, which I think is awesome. But there was so much more of my life that was being taken up, that it was an unhealthy level. And I think that's really the biggest part of my decision to step away. Let me put my effort my time, my energy into other things that matter, potentially more than Pokemon. Because it is ultimately, it is just a franchise, and the way that I indulge with that franchise is limited. But I'm missing out on being able to do a lot of other things. Like, if you can see, right there is a copy of Dracula. I recently, a couple months ago, started trying to read books more frequently, and I've kind of fallen off of it. I've read through Frankenstein. I've been working on Dracula very slowly, but that's a hobby that was being obstructed by just sitting down and playing the Pokemon games. I paint miniatures for like Star Wars Legion, Star Wars Shatterpoint, and Blackout. Playing Pokemon has obstructed me from being able to work through that pile of shame and be able to do that hobby. There's, like, I'm looking up here at a tower that's got video games that I own. And not only the stuff in that little, like, tower display case, but also stuff here in this drawer that I'm pointing at off screen. It has games that I've either started, never played, or, I'm close to beating. Like, it's just different areas in the game. There's so many other places that I want to be putting my time and effort into, but I was kind of being impeded from doing so by continuing to play the Pokemon games. So why not allow myself to build a healthy relationship with a franchise that I've given so much by stepping away, allowing myself to build the healthy relationships with other hobbies that I have, and return to this with a different perspective and be able to enjoy it in a much healthier way, is really what this ultimately is. Something I've done that's kind of cool in the time that I was away is, it was a little bit of an exercise to see if I could remember everything. But I compiled a list of the games that I have rolled credits for, and what's horrifying is about 30 of those games are just Pokemon games. And that's a third of my list. If I take out, because I've only just recently rolled credits for new games. Over the last few weeks, I've only been able to add a couple to that list. But that's a third of the list. That's kind of scary to think about. Like, it's nuts. So I've been allowing myself the ability to indulge in some of those other hobbies, indulge in doing this, indulge in doing this, and that's gonna be part of why the streams moving forward are not going to be Pokemon focused for an undisclosed amount of time. I would eventually like to finish the Emerald Project. I think I've already sunk, if I account for like the reset times that didn't get to stay in the card because it was, doing resets. I've probably, in this project, I'm probably eclipsing 300 hours. And I've gotten so much done already that eventually I would like to go back and finish it and be able to do the Ribbon Master stuff. but right now is not the time. And just to talk a little bit, because I do still have a little bit more time over the VOD that this will be going over. I've been able to roll credits for a couple Star Wars games. I actually just recently finished a second playthrough of the original Final Fantasy, because I got the pixel remaster for 1 through 6. I've been able to do a little bit more at the painting desk. I haven't been reading too much, but that's that's something I'm trying to get a little bit more disciplined about. I've drawn a little bit. I've been watching some TV shows related to Star Wars. But there have also been times where I've kind of just been a lazy lump, and oops. So something that I'm also trying to work on doing is getting back to a little bit of a release schedule. I still have quite a bit to edit and post for old VODs, but I'm also going to be adding to that backstock once streaming starts happening. And it's going to be weird coming back. At the time of recording this, it's still been a few weeks since I've streamed. It's going to be weird coming back. It was funny. I get affiliate. I do 3 streams, and then poof, this guy disappears for 3 weeks. But it's gonna be all right. Just building that healthy relationship with that hobby is something that I think everybody should make sure that they're doing. Sometimes you get just really excited about a certain hobby and you jump headfirst into it. You're trying to learn everything about it, but burnout is a thing. You're gonna eventually reach a point where you're not gonna enjoy the hobby, and it's gonna ruin it for you. And don't be afraid to step away from it for a little bit. Just allow yourself the ability, do something else, come back to it when you're excited about it, when you're feeling happy about it. I think that's a really good perspective to look at it. Star Wars in a way has kind of been filling the void that Pokemon has left, just being that I've been playing a lot of the Star Wars video games, watching Star Wars movies, shows, building and painting Star Wars miniatures, and part of it is I'm excited about it. But I'm also, with even like the painting hobby, while I'm primarily a player for, or like the Galactic Republic faction, kind of experiencing a little bit of the burnout with painting clone troopers. Now I'm working on Rebels. It's something different. It's kind of to help get me excited about the hobby, and maybe I could learn something while I'm painting Rebels, go back to painting clone troopers and paint them better. Don't be afraid to distance yourself from certain things, especially if that thing, that hobby, that show, that book, or anything, if it is something you really, really enjoy. Because it would be a shame if you end up losing your appreciation for that thing. And I think that was just really what I needed to do with the Pokemon franchise. One of the nice things about kind of having pivoted some of my my attention and the hyperfixation over to Star Wars is I have a few more people that I'm able to really get into some of the weeds with, so I can kind of share in that with other people. And I think that kind of helps keep me kind of excited about what I'm getting into. And it's ultimately feeding into a little bit of the goal, which is try and get through my gaming pile of shame too. Like Star Wars Republic Commando was a game that I finished recently. As of, I believe it was just a couple days ago, I finished the main story as well as the DLC story for the 2017 Star Wars Battlefront 2. Played a little bit of the classic Battlefront 1. I did a little bit of shopping at the same local game store that sold the Coliseum bonus disc and XD Gale of Darkness. The same store that I bought those, I ended up buying some Star Wars games from. So it was kind of cool going back to them, being able to pick up some stuff for the collection and just kind of enjoy other video games, man. It's been really cool. But again, pretty sure I know what I'm gonna do for the next stream, because I do want to do like a big franchise as a focal point, but maybe like one for like the other day that I stream during the week is this will be something different. So it'll be like, hey, one-off games, maybe play like this game on like a Tuesday stream, and that'll be Tuesdays we'll be playing this for a while, but then like when I stream on Friday is gonna be more of like the longer stream. We're gonna be able to do the big franchise game kind of a deal, and that's sort of the thing that I'm thinking about in my brain. Without telling you what game or franchise that they are, the one that I'm looking to do on like the Tuesday streams is actually a game that's eluded me for a long time. I would only ever play demos of it at the store, and I was like, oh man, this is so cool. Like there's the mechanics of it, there's this customization, there's all this kind of cool stuff with it, but I just never could get my hands on it. And it was actually a game I got the same day that I got Gale of Darkness and the Coliseum bonus disc. It's really, really weird that like that kind of seems to keep connecting, but it was so cool being able to add that to the collection and go, I finally own the game that I could never get my hands on for like 20 years, dude. It's nuts. But there's that. The big franchise I'm looking at, without spoiling it, if I'm streaming again by the time this episode comes out and I have streamed this game, you will know what it is. Very big franchise. I have played one game. I have not rolled the credits for the game. And this game I also played like 5-6 years ago, partially because it was a franchise that I had just never touched. I know a lot of people who play it. I've been near people who have played it, but never played it myself. Decided to play one of the games, got a little ways into it, and then just never picked it back up. I can't really say why I never ended up finishing it, but I'm going to be coming back and finishing that, and hopefully playing through other stuff in the franchise. So really excited about that. Just need to actually like get streaming again. I think that's probably the thing that's just been the hardest, is just trying to like make the time and figure out exactly what it is that I'm streaming. I think I've got that pretty locked in. It's just a matter of the discipline side of it. So that's really why I'm stepping away from the franchise, and just kind of a little bit of stuff that I've been doing outside of it. It's been nice. I've been able to Republic Commando was actually one of the games that I recently rolled credits for. That was a game that eluded me for some time as well. I was fortunate enough to have gotten that on super discount on Steam for the May the 4th sale. Got to play it because I remember as a kid, one of my neighbors at in this apartment complex, he had Republic Commando, and I was into Star Wars. I don't know how. I think the hyperfixation was pretty deep, but it wasn't insane. It wasn't crazy deep. Also, this was at a time that Star Wars TV shows were nowhere near as abundant as they are now. It was really just like the movies. I think it was the Genndy Tartakovsky Clone Wars series. And then just like some straggler kind of things. But there was nowhere near the extent of TV shows. Like the 3D Clone Wars, I don't believe had started by this point. There was no Bad Batch. There was no Rebels. There was no... What are some of the other shows? But like none of those existed. This was 2004 ballpark. Was about the time that I had played Republic Commando. It was a neighbor, and you know, he had Republic Commando. I would like go over, hang out, and got to play Republic Commando a little bit with him. I'm like, this is nuts. And that was actually that game is actually part of the reason why I wanted to play Clone Troopers in Star Wars Legion. Which, if I maybe potentially possibly start a tabletop channel, I could go into a little bit more detail as to what caused me to start playing Clone Troopers. Maybe. But like, that was a game that really, really stuck out to me, and it had evaded me for some time. And finally got to play it on Steam. And that's one of those games that I would love to own a physical copy of, just to be like, I've played this game. I have it on console, so, you know, at any point I could play it on console, you know, and be able to actually play it with a controller, because Steam doesn't support controller with Republic Commando. I was real upset about that. Not very good at shooter games with mouse and keyboard. Would rather play them on controller. So, but yeah, like, I've been able to just work on playing games that I never got to roll credits for, and it's games that I'm excited about. Like, just looking up here at this, the tower of stuff that I've got to play, like Transformers War for Cybertron. I started it, never got to finish it. Been really excited about, like, I've been wanting to play that. I actually have been working through Thief. Been a minute since I touched it, but cool game. I think it would be a lot of fun to be able to sit down and actually finish. Never played Dragon's Dogma, but I do have a copy of that. Classic Battlefront, I have a copy of that I can play through. I've got a couple of the Splinter Cell games. Elden Ring. I still need to finish Elden Ring. I've got Morrowind I've downloaded on my PC. Need to play Morrowind. What else do I have in here? Oh, The Witcher. Never played The Witcher. I've owned a copy of that game for, I think, 4 years. Never touched it. Yeah, and then like Dark Souls games. Like, there's just so many other video games that I would like to be able to play, but I just haven't actually sat down to do it. Also, sorry that my bed's such a mess. It's kind of coming into the camera view, but we're kind of just in a vibe and sort of stance while we're talking about it. And really, that's really why. So if for whatever reason this episode of the podcast does not come out until a little after I've been streaming, this is something that I may talk about a little bit on stream, which I will have a link to that down in the description. But this is more of a longer explanation. I probably would keep the explanation a lot more concise on stream, just so that way it's not getting bogged down. And having this to be able to focus a little bit more and not have to take away from the gameplay, which thankfully is going to be pretty much silent. I think that'll help make sure that the streams are a lot more engaging and don't get bogged down, kind of a situation. What are some other goals? Play more video games. Excuse me. Third one. What are the goals? Yeah, play more video games, paint more minis, try and read more books, hang out with my friends more. Hang out with my girlfriend. It's about it. It's really about it. Just, try and use the time freed up from not playing Pokemon and put it towards other hobbies, and just make sure that I'm enjoying myself, because that's ultimately what hobbies are for. It's supposed to help de-stress, and they're supposed to be things that you have fun doing. And video games has been a major part of my life, even if there were periods where I was a lot less active playing, console games or handheld or whatever it was. Gaming has still been such a major component of my life. And it's supposed to be fun, relaxing, something you can enjoy doing yourself, something you can enjoy with your friends. There are games like Mario Party where friendships are probably have ended, or Mario Kart, which are games I typically try to avoid, but doing co-op stuff in Elden Ring, or split screen in Halo, or this game or that game, whatever. But that's been something that's cool about it. You can enjoy it yourself, you can enjoy it with others, and tabletop in a way is the same. TV, movies, stuff like that. So just make sure you're enjoying your hobby, whatever it is, and it's it's not hurting you, it's not hurting others. Just enjoy it. That's what hobbies are for. Any closing thoughts? Because this part has definitely been a bit rambly. Yeah, that's really the goal for myself with the not playing the franchise. I think the game choice, at least one of them, is going to be something that people are going to be really excited about. on stream. The other one is probably going to be a lot more niche, but it could also be a situation that, you know, do a couple streams of it. It's not super vibing. People are like, oh, this game's kind of lame. I could play it off stream. We could jump into something else. Maybe potentially jump back into doing some Elden Ring stuff. But those are at least like the two that I'm thinking of, as well as Elden Ring, are really like the big ones that I'm thinking about pursuing on stream in the near future. I keep forgetting to look into what the prequel for Transformers War for Cybertron is, because that might be kind of a cool, because I think it's a trilogy for that series, but like be able to play through that trilogy on stream or off stream, whichever, you know, see just where everything is at. Try and hopefully edit. That's another thing that hopefully I can do with the time not playing Pokemon, is edit more videos. It has been quiet on the YouTube. Hopefully get the podcast episodes up or edited as well, because everything's still pretty up in the air. Not really up in the air as in like getting it out, it's when I get it out. So I don't know like what day of the week this will be. Hopefully by the time I actually upload this video I'll have a release schedule planned out, and we can go over that a little bit more in the next episode. But yeah, try and get this. Got a cool little thing that I'm working on the side. Got to do a little bit of editing for that over there. So that's really it. Just try and get back into the swing of things. Get streaming again. Play some stuff that I think people will be excited about. But thank you for tuning in. I appreciate you all for listening to me ramble. I think I actually have an idea for the next episode. I know I did ask the question of the day being that glitch corruption of the file thing that happened in the Gen 3 games. But in the next episode, down in the comments, let me know, do you want to hear about the games that I've rolled credits for, and like games that I've started but not rolled credits for? Is that something you guys are interested in listening to? If not, I can, you know, we can definitely talk about some sort of a different topic that's probably still video game related. Might potentially explore a little bit of other media, depending on if it's like tied to a certain franchise. Let me know what your thoughts down below with the if you've experienced anything with those glitches. Yeah, the end of this episode has been weird, and actually part of the reason why I actually recorded an episode before, but re-recorded it because the back half got a little bit ranty. Also, I think I was yawning like crazy in the original, but I think it's such a weird kind of position that I'm in with not being active in this franchise and having to kind of jump back into streaming and stuff. But yeah, try to get the next episode recorded. Let me know your thoughts, and you know what? Take care of yourself, be good to one another, and stay safe. It's the way that I sign off all my videos. I'll be signing off the podcast like this, and I'll be signing off all my streams like that as well. I have been doing that. but it's something that I stand by. I say it in all of those different things, and I mean every bit of it. But make sure you are taking care of yourself. I know sometimes it can be a little bit difficult depending on the day, but keep your head up, make sure you're drinking water, and hopefully the next podcast will be a little bit less rambly, and hope to see you over there on stream. Take care of yourself.